The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight.
So, welcome to the Weird Tales radio show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Charles Christian and with me is Janie. This is episode 24 of the Weird Tales radio show, and we're here to make another foray into the world of ghosts, geeks, urban myths, magic and folklore. Now here's Janie with more tales of ghostly activities.
Hello. The location is Lochranza, which does sound a bit Italian, but no, it is in Ayrshire in Scotland, and it makes its appearance every year in early July. It dates back to the early 18th century, so it could be connected to the story of Bonnie Prince Charlie's rebellion. So, the legend is a bagpiper who died in the nearby hills now walks into the village on calm summer evenings. But the only indication of his presence is the sound of his pipes. It is said that if you follow the sound of the pipes, the elusive piper will suddenly cease playing the moment you get close, then start up again piping somewhere else.
Of course, there could be an alternative explanation.
Oh, you don't say. What would that be then?
I do say. Well, it was back in the mid-60s, and I suppose you could say it was my first paranormal investigation, although we called it ghost hunting back then. I'd just got my car and used to visit my then-girlfriend, who lived in the countryside a few miles outside my hometown of Scarborough. She told me her kid brother was frightened to complete his evening newspaper delivery round because of a phantom piper who could be heard playing the bagpipes late on summer evenings on a quiet local road called Urton Moor Lane. The local rumour was the phantom piper was the ghost of a soldier with a Scottish regiment that had been stationed in Scarborough during World War II and subsequently been killed in action. Cynic that I am, I can't help think this explanation may have been partially influenced by the recent top 10 chart success of Andy Stewart's song A Scottish Soldier. Anyway, one evening, fortified by a rum and coke in a local pub, I drove up to Urton Moor Lane and waited, and then I heard the plaintive wailing of bagpipes. So I set off to investigate, and there he was. Illuminated by the final rays of the setting sun, there stood a Scottish piper, complete with kilt and bagpipes. Unfortunately, it was Jack Black, a local solicitor's clerk and, coincidentally, a long-standing friend of my parents'. He was a member of the town's Highland pipe band who, to avoid annoying the neighbours, regularly drove out into the countryside to practice on his bagpipes. No sarky comment from you.
No, not at all. No. I was transported into the vision of. I wasn't listening, to be honest.
Time for our big interview, which today is with mythographer, lecturer and author Martini Fisher. The subject is the latest in the Time Maps series of books, Matriarchy and the Goddess Culture. In other words, what happened when women ruled the world? In a time of the old culture, a culture so ancient it was before history was even written. What happened to the great goddess? When did the patriarchy start? Your latest book, Time Maps, the Matriarchy and the Goddess Culture. Take me through this. Tell me a little bit more about this.
Okay. So the matriarchy basically lasted for more than 30,000 years. And it declined over a period of 5,000 years, and it became extinct about 1,000 years ago. And then the whole world changed. The history still shows that there were a lot of cultures that has a matriarchal empire, such as Tibet in the 6th and 7th century, and also the 11th dynasty of Egypt. Yeah, the royal succession became fixed in the female line. But really, the matriarchy itself was a lot bigger, a lot more distinctive before that. And there was this goddess. The notion of the mother goddess basically comes from one big goddess that we kind of disfigured over time. So little pieces of the mother goddess we would tend to recognize today in the goddesses that we know, such as Demeter and her daughter Kore.
Yes.
Yeah, elements of that mother goddess you would be able to find from those two ladies. But the Western history, in the Western history at least, mother goddess is not as recognizable these days, because they've been broken down to so many different pieces. But in the Asian culture and also the Polynesian culture, we still recognize the direct descendants, if I can say that, of the mother goddess from, say, the Nyi Roro Kidul, which is the Queen of the South Sea in Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also Hinamoana from Hawaii, who's actually known as Queen of the South Sea as well.
Right.
They provide elements of mother goddess, yes.
Yeah. With the idea, obviously I'm familiar with the idea of the mother goddess, but do you think it was one mother goddess, or was it lots of societies independently developed the idea of a mother goddess? Because I mean, the communications between, say, Egypt or parts of Europe and Indonesia, the South Seas, New Zealand, etc., would have been non-existent in those days. And I mean, you can understand, because we're dealing with people who most of them would not have had a written culture. There was no communications links, relatively poor education. They'd all be familiar with the concept of a woman giving birth and the mother, and the fact that that's where life comes from. Did they all independently come up with the same idea, or did it somehow migrate?
I would say it somehow migrates, but also I'm taking in mind as well the individual culture, of course. So they would have had the idea of the Great Mother independently, and they would also take in elements of different cultures depending on the migrations and the movements, societies in those days.
Mm-hmm. And you were saying just now that it goes back 30,000 years.
Yes.
That is really to the very earliest of Homo sapiens, Cro-Magnon, if you like.
Yeah.
Did the Neanderthal have a similar culture? Because, I mean, there's obviously an overlap of about 10, 15,000 years between the two forms of primitive humanity.
Yes. Well, I think so. I do think that the Neanderthals and, people in the ancient world, around that time, I would imagine that they would work with the gender partitioning a little bit better than we have these days. There there were a lot of gender positioning in all cultures, and but the thing is, the attitude towards gender petitioning would have been different as well. It's not like, say, for example, today, if I were to say, well, I'm a woman, my job is staying at home with the kids, it might offend a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you're the man, your job is to bring me fish. You know, it might offend a lot of people.
Yeah.
But 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 the thing with gender petitioning is that it worked
Yeah.
for many centuries, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the women stay at home and the man has to go out and hunt. It's not really like that at all. There's a tribe, I think an Aboriginal tribe, where the partitioning is the women would look after the children and the men's job was to cook.
Right.
Yeah. So the partitioning itself, it depends on the individual culture. It's not about what's right and what's wrong, but what works and what doesn't work.
But how does that then fit in with the concept of the mother goddess? And are we taking the view that the mother goddess, if you like, was the supreme god, or was there, as some people suggest, there was a sort of male equivalent and it was a male and female type dual god and goddess scenario, or was one more important than the other? This is talking in ancient times.
Yeah, of course. Well, the Aztecs have the dual god, one the female and one the male. And the Philippines also have Agamem, who's the lady creator, and she's the co-creator of the sun, moon, and earth and stars with her husband. So they believe in dual god as well. So there are some cultures that believe in the concept of dual deity with the male and female aspect. But there are also some cultures who just believe in the female part, and she gave birth to everybody else.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Dayaks in Borneo, where I'm living now, they honor Jata. She created the world and the sky, and she's the dragon figure. She's an inhabitant of the primeval chaos, a little bit like Tiamat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't. So far, I've spoken to some people. I'm still trying to find the written evidence of it, but I haven't found any male equivalent for her. Hopefully, I will. If I do, I will let you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with the ancient cultures, were there any that were purely there, if you like, top god was a male? I mean, once you start getting over to classical antiquity in the West with the Greeks, certainly it eventually emerges that the top god is male and all the other gods and goddesses are subservient. Was there anything comparable?
Yes. Well, in Indonesia, Ratu Kidul was considered to be the top goddess for a long time, but before Islam came into Indonesia.
Yes, yeah.
And even before Hinduism came into Indonesia.
Yeah.
As well. So she was the supreme goddess. But then, of course, as Hinduism actually came in to Indonesia, then we get introduced to a lot of different male gods as well. With her, I would remember that Ratu Kidul was the main goddess, as well as then Hinduism came in, and it was Dewi Sri, which is an equivalent of the Hindu Lakshmi.
Right.
They're quite similar.
Yes.
Yeah. So she's kind of the gentler version, but Ratu Kidul was the scary version the one who is beautiful and the one who's scary at the same time. So
Yes.
she was considered the mother goddess because she embodies all those elements.
And you were saying that the mother goddess, if you like, culture was the predominant one for millennia. And then round about a few thousand years ago, the mother goddess, if you like, was dethroned and it became more male god oriented.
Yes, that's right.
What was the sort of,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what was the stimulus for that? What was the, if you like, tipping point that there was a change?
Okay. Well, it is. Let's see. If I were to explain this to people, I would usually explain this. And I don't mean to be sexist about this at all, but
No.
I would usually explain this in terms of the male tendencies and the female tendencies. Yeah. We asked in our book what happened if women ruled the world, and my very quick and dirty answer for that would be, the world will be very stable, but it's also progress will be very slow.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, progress will still be made, but it's going to be very, very slow compared to if the men took charge. So it's the same with the goddess culture as well. In the name of progress, with how progress was made, sometimes if you want to move things very quickly, you don't really have that much time for details. And the thing with the mother goddess is that there's so many elements to her and so many details. And that's why the goddess became broken down, such as, an example, Demeter and Kore. Demeter is the mother, Kore became the maiden, and then later on in the story you would find, what was that lady's name? Luba or something like that. There was a woman that Demeter met, who's an older woman, and she told her a joke to cheer her up a little bit, and she had the strength to find Kore again. But I can't remember her name. I will let you know.
Yeah.
So she became the crone. So the three aspects of mother goddess, all three was in the same woman, but then you
Split into the
separate the
right,
three.
came into the triple goddess type.
Yeah.
Yes. That
Yeah, exactly.
certainly in the West has had a revival in recent times with Wicca, where that is one of their beliefs that
Yes.
yes, the maiden, mother, crone, triple goddess. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's the thing. If we come across a concept that we find to be quite big and quite complicated, our natural reaction would be to reduce it to bite-sized chunks, so that we can understand it a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I think that's what happened, and then as we go, as progress is being made, then the mother goddess becomes, even more divided as well, and she became weaker as a character. So we have all these male character who became more dominant, such as Orpheus and Eurydice, and Orpheus became obviously very dominant, and the women were reduced to, they became. I like to say, when I was younger, I didn't really like reading Ulysses or the Iliad or anything like that, because the women are just so passive, and they're the ones that the men came home to. They don't really get to see the excitements or anything like that. But so the women were reduced to the home, but it's not. Reduce might be a terrible word for it, but they are the home. They are the space.
Yes.
They take it for granted that the women will always be there, Yeah, that's the reduced version of it. Well, the men, they're going around making progresses all over the place, but they know that at the end of the day they will come home to the women, the mother
Yes.
or the wife.
What about the suggestion that we've seen almost a replacement of a variation of the mother goddess in early Christianity with the Virgin Mary? And I mean, indeed, one of her titles is the Queen of Heaven, which is very goddess-like.
That's right.
Have we still got, if you like, in Christianity, which is very much perceived as a male type religion with God, who's quite clearly a man with a beard, and Jesus.
Yeah.
But do we actually have a continuation with the different name of the goddess culture in Christianity?
We do, yes, to some extent, but I think we've lost the dimension of the goddess quite a lot. With Mary, for example, as far as I know, she has obviously being the mother of the Son of God, she has no mean bone in her body.
Yes.
Yeah, she was so always very nice. She's pure. She's innocent. She's the virgin and the mother, but she was never the crone. But the thing with nice girls, it's a little bit like we grew up with this idea that nice girls are natural and bad boys are natural as well. But the thing is, the concept of nice girls it doesn't really exist. It usually is men and politicians who invented that concept, I think.
Yes.
Because women are not nice. They're terrifying, and a lot of them are very capable of going off to wars if needs be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even in Japan, for example, in the 15th or 16th century, if the men goes out to war and the enemy would presume to actually try to attack the man's house and he's not there, the women were very much capable of holding their own weapons, and they will be the one to fight and defend the home. So, yeah, I think that sort of non-nice part
Yes.
of the great goddess is lost these days.
And of course, it is a topic certainly in Christianity that from 3rd, 4th century onwards, the elders of the church tended to downplay any female characters in the Jesus story. So, Mary Magdalena gets more or less written out of history, or gets branded as a harlot and a minor player, whereas there is a lot of people who believe she is a key player and was effectively one of the major apostles in the early days of the church.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. And what about the spread of the mother goddess? You mentioned the Aztec. Is there other indications that there was a similar goddess culture, matriarchal culture in the Americas, North America in particular?
Yes, well, not so much the mother goddess culture. The Federation of Six Nations, you've heard about them, yeah? They're
Yes.
they have a very good system where the women are playing a very large role as well. So I do think that actually is the most modern that we can find as far as the role of the mother goddess in the governance. Yeah. And apart from that, well, in Indonesia, you would actually still find some cultures that are matriarchal, but here it's which is unfortunate, and which is the reason why I really like to spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia. It is it is quite difficult to actually find a written evidence of of mythology and of beliefs, because the culture is not really a written culture. It's more of an oral
Yeah.
tradition.
Yes.
As well. But there are some cultures in Indonesia where the tribes are actually governed by women even to this day.
Now, tell me a bit more about the books, because Matriarchy and the Goddess Culture is the fourth in your time maps series.
Yes.
What, for the benefit of listeners, what were the other three, and what's the time maps concept?
The overall concept, though, well, time map actually came about from my father's research. Dr. R.K. Fisher, he is my father, and he's passed away now, but he was a mathematician, and he had a passion for history, but he spent a lot of time in Asia and in Africa and in different parts of the world. And he started to realize that the way he was taught history, the way he was taught in Australia, where we came from, is sort of completely different from the history as it was taught in Indonesia or in the Philippines. And he started to research why that happened. How did everything became so westernized, and why is it that the Western culture has sort of the last word on how history is written, that sort of thing. So he started to try to retell the history, well, at least for him, the bits that he found to be more interesting from the non-Western point of view.
Right, gotcha, yeah.
So he used his he used his mathematical skills as well to kind of just redo the calculations again in regards to the timeline as well, which is very useful, especially in Southeast Asia, because everything is being told orally, and you kind of need a bit of guidelines on this event happened when exactly, and this next event will happen. Well, is it before or after this event? So he was very good at doing that. So he did his own research for those 4 books for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And then he brought me in because I was already a history student at that time. And I expressed an interest in that book. But then I started reading it, and I thought, well, they're quite dry for my taste, and because my interest was in ancient history, but in ancient religion. I don't really just want to know the facts. I want to know why, and I know that belief actually forms a really, really big part on how we view things and how we react to things as well. So usually the mythological and the religious aspects written in the book came from me.
Yeah.
So that's from a mythographer and a mathematician's perspective. So the first book, we're talking about prehistory and biological evolution from both our standpoints, and also we discussed the first chapter. We discuss how people view history. Why do, say, for example, the 9/11 in America became a much bigger deal, and people became a lot more emotional than, say, something that happened many years ago. And the thing is, we tend to feel a lot more emotional, a lot more attached to something that happens that is closer to us. Yes. At the moment. I am the center of my own little universe. You are the center of your own little universe. Yeah. So that we started to kind of look at history again from that perspective, taking that into consideration as well.
So Just say, what are the other books then? What are the 3 other books?
So that was the first one. History, prehistory, and biological evolution. The second book is Australia and the early sea voyages. So we were talking about we tried to go as far back as we can in Australian history, and we tried to find out as much as we can about the Aborigines, and we looked at the ancient travels at the
Yes.
time and how things move about in the ancient world. And the third book is about writing and the evolution of languages and writings and how languages actually evolved from one form to the other. And then we have this book, Matriarchy and Goddess Culture.
And have you any plans for a further books in the series?
I do, yes. I'll have to look back into my notes. We have a lot of notes. The only problem is that now I'm essentially working by myself because my father is he's no longer with us. So I'm kind of continuing on. But he did leave a lot of notes from his side, so I can always just research my own part of it, and then we make it into a book. So I'm hoping that I would have at least 4 or 5 more books in this series.
That's brilliant. Have a good evening, and thanks again.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Okay,
Bye.
then. Bye.
You are listening to the Weird Tales Radio Show with Charles Christian on internet radio and podcast.
Let's have some cryptozoology news, as there's just been another sighting of the British Bigfoot. The location was the A15 road in the east of the country, just south of Brigg, heading south towards Lincoln. The time was 1:30 to 2 p.m, and the date was the 17th, or maybe the 18th, the reports are a little unclear, of June. The witnesses say they saw a creature about 8 to 9 feet tall walking upright on 2 legs and covered in black fur. They observed it for a couple of minutes while it was walking through some long grass before it disappeared into an area of bushes. And that's it. This is just the latest in a series of Bigfoot-type sightings in the British Isles, dating back to over 1,000 years ago, although the preferred British name is Woodwose, in effect, Wild Man of the Woods. But what is the Woodwose or British Bigfoot? Suggestions range from escaped great apes to feral children to people suffering from hypertrichosis, a medical condition involving excessive hair growth over the face and entire body, and even to some form of race memory of primitive people living in the woods on the margins of civilized society. However, in his book Natural History, the Roman author and philosopher Pliny the Elder says that along with human beings, Homo sapiens, that's us lot, there is also a race called Sylvestras, wild men who have humanoid bodies but a coat of fur, fangs among their teeth and no capacity to speak. Given the range of sightings, not just in the UK, but from around the world, including the Bigfoot and Sasquatch of North America to the Yeti of the Himalayas, it's hard not to conclude there is something out there. We just don't know what. As they say on the excellent British Bigfoot Sightings Reports website, for those who believe, no proof is necessary. For those who don't believe, no proof is possible. That's it. We're out of time again this week. Janie and I look forward to joining you again, but until then, pleasant dreams, safe travels, and don't be frightened of things that go bump into night. Just remember the old saying, during the day I don't believe in ghosts, but at night I'm a little more open-minded. Nope, that one doesn't help either, does it? Good night.
Black Shuck. The demon dog of East Anglia is baying at the moon.
Which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, magic, and folklore. Keep in touch with us online at www.urbanfantasist.com or by email at urbanfantasist.icloud.com or on Twitter at Christian Uncut. Good night. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Go.